Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Miner. I'm a certified photo manager, and I'm so happy to welcome you to our session today. This month is in September. We're talking about Save Your Photos, and we have another great class for you. We've been talking about how to digitize and protect our photos and our files, both printed and digital. And today we're going to talk about what happens when disaster strikes. We're going to learn about backups and what really helps and what really matters and the best practice. If you haven't hit our like button yet, please do that and subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get to know all of our classes, and we have a lot of things that you can go back and look at and things that are coming up. So please hit that like button and subscribe. We want to know if you have ever lost an important picture or file. That is terrifying. So if you have, please put it in the chat. We're going to be talking about losing those things and how we get them back today. And we're going to start in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Our session today is called Rebuilding Your Photo Collection After a Disaster, How to Recover Lost or Damaged Photos. And this is such an important process of saving your photos because we work and now we need to know what to do. Whether your photos are on external hard drives or SD cards or on a cloud, today's session is going to help you recover those precious memories. Our speaker today is amazing. David Mark Erickson is a photographer and a certified photo manager. He has extensive experience in digital photography, technology, and he's guided many clients through recovering lost and damaged photos and helping them to establish a reliable backup system so it doesn't happen in the future, which we all need. In this session, David will share strategies for checking and restoring your backups, when to use DIY software, and when to call in the professional. Storage can be very expensive, and so he's going to talk about different technologies that can affect that recovery and such a critical time of when to get started on trying to save your files. By the end, you're going to have a great framework of how to deal with any photo disaster. So as we go along, I'm sure you'll have questions. Please write them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And again, like and subscribe so that you can listen to all of our Save Your Photos Month classes this month. So we're going to turn things over to David now. Welcome, David.
Thanks,
we're
Angie.
so happy to have you.
Thanks for that great introduction.
Oh, well, all right. Teach us all what you know.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'll skip a lot of the personal introduction stuff, other than to say that as a photographer and a photo professional, so much of what I've learned from about my profession and what I do, I've learned from other people in my field and other photographers, other photo managers. And so it's really fulfilling for me to be able to give back some of what I've learned over the course of the year. So I really feel grateful for being here, and I hope that we can cover some interesting and useful information. So we've got a lot of material to run through, and there's a number of things that you're going to want to take away. But the number one thing is if you have a loss of data, one of the first most important things is stop and don't make it worse. We're going to talk about why or how to do a bunch of stuff. But one of the things is very Be cautious about how you proceed, because what you do to try to recover or restore can actually make your situation worse. So, really quick, if you have a drive that has a water, fire, or other visible damage or is making sounds, don't plug it in. That's a key sign of seeking professional help. What you do next is very important, but knowing what to do next is even more important, so that your actions don't make the problem worse as you go along. So, we're going to talk about two major pathways today when you have a data loss, and that is restore versus recovery. Restore is getting photos back from an existing backup, and recovery is trying to retrieve your photos from a damaged or corrupted storage device. Now, a couple of things that I want to mention really quick is there are some critical time windows that these are sort of set by industry standards. With a backup restoration, sometimes that can take hours and even days to get your data to retrieved out of a backup system. If you need to send a drive for recovery, there are different time windows as well that can affect that. SSDs on internal computers, you could have a data loss that occurs within minutes to hours. We'll talk about that specifically coming up. With a hard disk drive, you could have days to weeks. But in certain circumstances, maybe there's water corrosion, maybe there was a flood or something like that. You could have hours to, not hours, but you need to be very attentive to the time and getting that drive to a professional if you want that, because water can start to corrode. So there are different timings that you want to consider, and you want to take that into effect, but you don't want to take hasty actions. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover some foundational knowledge that applies to both recovery and restoration. We're going to talk about different storage types and why different strategies for different storage types matters. We're going to talk about different damage types. How can drives or storage systems be damaged? And then what do we need to do with those specific circumstances? And then we can talk about some recovery methods. After that, we'll talk about restoration principles and guidelines. So if you're doing a restore, if you're trying to pull data from a backup drive, what are some key principles that you're going to want to remember while you're working with that system? And if you're into a recovery situation, I've got a couple of visual guides that are going to help us navigate which steps to take after, under certain circumstances. So I've got a matrix and a flow chart that will help us navigate that stressful and maybe a little bit complex situation. Then we're going to talk a little bit about software and tools, and then we're going to talk a little bit about professional services, and hopefully we'll run through this at a reasonable clip, and then we'll have enough time to answer any of your questions. If you have a clarification question, like, hey, wait, what is that term that you were just throwing around? Or I don't understand what that particular thing is. Feel free to ask it in the chat, and Angie can jump in and let me know, hey, there's a question about this. And then if you have substantive questions, definitely save those for the end, and then we have time to talk them through and hopefully get you some answers. All right, so let's carry on to our next slide here. So we're going to talk about storage types, damage types, and recovery methods. And I'm just going through my notes here. I've got a lot of material, so you'll see me, going through my notes a few times. So I apologize if it seems like I disconnect slightly, but I want to make sure that I'm really on target, because this is such an important topic and it can have big consequences. So understanding storage types. So we have three basic types of hard drive or storage drives. Why does it matter that we want to talk about this? Because different drives or different storage have different recovery approaches. And what works for one may actually cause damage or loss to another. So we want to understand which kind of drives that we're dealing with and what are the appropriate recovery next steps that we want to take there. So the first thing you want to do is identify what kind of drive you have, and then you want to think about what kind of damage was done, and then that's going to give you your next step of actions. So let's look at a couple of different types of drives that are very common in our world today. Hard disk drives, everybody really knows these. Hold on one second. I have an example over here, and I left it on the other table. Apologies for that. Of course, I neatly set it out of the way and forgot about it. So we have hard disk drives here. This is an old drive that I pulled out of a system, and you can see a picture on the screen there. And oh, sorry, you flipped the camera. That's fine. We'll come back to that later. And the important thing to know about hard disks, these are the traditional spinning hard drives that we've been using for years and years. They've got little magnetic platters on the inside, like a record player. And just like a record player, there's a mechanical needle that moves across the surface, and actually they stack multiple platters over the top of each other, and there are multiple needles. And so that moves across the surface and reads data, little ones and zeros that are in little pits. Now, the nice thing about these traditional hard drives is, yeah, they're a little slower and they get a little warm, and sometimes they can make a little noise. The great thing for a recovery standpoint is a lot of times the data is still there, because when we delete a file, we just delete it from the record of it from the index, so that the ones and zeros are still on the platter, and they're the index of where that set of ones and zeros is. That's the only thing that's been deleted. So we can use software to go and read all the little ones and zeros from all the little grooves, and then actually reconstruct the data. So that's really great from a recovery standpoint. Mechanically speaking, yeah, the drops, impacts, the mechanical parts can fail. They can get hot. They can be damaged by fire and water. So they have some mechanical vulnerabilities, but they're actually really one of the easiest things to recover data from. Nowadays, a lot of computers have what we call SSDs, solid state drives. These are electronic memory drives. There's no moving parts in them at all. All of the data is stored as little electrical charges in those chips, where you see on there, it says NAND flash memory. There's little just circuits in there, and they're just holding an electrical charge of whether it's a 1 or a 0. And they are extremely fast. They are very durable. They can be dropped. The circuit boards are rather resilient themselves, but we have to be careful, because internal SSDs, the one that's inside your computer and in most of your laptops these days, and a lot of your newer desktops, it's an SSD. There is a computer code command. It's called TRIM, T-R-I-M. It's not an acronym. It's just a command. And what's happening is to keep your hard drive efficient in the space and in its behavior, when you delete a file and you remove it, say, from the recycling bin or the trash bin, that data is probably gone within minutes, if not within hours. And that is by design, because the system needs to keep a really clean system. So once you've emptied the trash or emptied the recycling bin, it's very hard to recover that kind of data from your internal hard drive on your computer. Now, external hard drives, external SSDs, they don't have that command running. So you actually have a greater potential to recover data from an external SSD. And that's why, especially for those of us who are professional photo managers and we're working with our clients' photos, why we say a lot of times, hey, the best place to store your data is on an external hard drive that's being backed up by another system, and we'll talk about that, but not keeping that in there. And if you do have data on there, making sure that you have a robust backup system backing that up. Okay, let's talk about another common piece of data, which are, I left the title as solid state drives. This should have been flash memory. I apologize. This is thumb drives. We're all very familiar with these. They're very, very simple devices. They do not, unlike an SSD, which has a lot of some more complex controlling electronics in it, thumb drives have very simple controllers, and they're just reading data and recording data. And so, like regular hard drives, the data persists and it's very easy to restore data on these relative to SSDs. SSDs can be some of the hardest things to recover data from. So thumb drives are great, but they're also very small and they're not very sophisticated and they're not very fast. But they're very durable and they're very portable. They changed our lives when they came around. So we love them, and they're great for moving small stores of files around, but impractical when you're working with terabytes of data. So let's talk a little bit about data loss categories. They are, let's see here. Let me just check my notes. Data loss categories. So there are 4 types that I have categorized. Category A, and this is going to become important later when we have this matrix of what to do. This is logical, what we call logical loss. This is accidentally deleting or formatting something, or software crashed and it corrupted a whole bunch of data, or maybe there's some malware or ransomware. This is where, when we're doing data recovery, we have a lot of success. We can get data back quite a lot, and we'll talk about more recovery rates a little bit later. But this is the most recoverable of all of our situations. The next category is electronic failures. So we have a power surge, a component failed, there was damage to the electronic circuit boards, maybe firmware corruption, maybe the cable broke, where you plug in the cable. This is tricky. It's a question of whether the drive can be recognized and if we can pull data still off of it, or sometimes they're just dead and we have to seek professional support. The next type, category C, is physical or environmental damage. That's the really difficult stuff. That's when a drive has been dropped. And I'm not talking dropped off like the edge of your desk. I'm talking like dropped multiple stories, or it was crushed or ran over by a truck, spills or flooding, fire, extreme heat damage. That is where we have the hardest time recovering data, and where we really oftentimes seek immediate professional help to be able to manage for that. And then the last type is progressive hardware failure. That's where a drive, it's like ejecting by itself, or it's maybe making a weird little clicking or whirring sound you haven't heard before. It seems to be slowing down when it used to be fast. Or other weird glitchy behaviors. Oftentimes that means that the moving parts or some other system has started to degrade. It's mechanically starting to break down, and we often have good recovery results from there. And so understanding the type of drive and then the type of loss, that's going to help us make some future decisions about what we do. But first, let's talk about some recovery methods. When we go to recover data off of a failing drive or a damaged drive, we can restore from a backup. We can use software for recovery. So we can use specialized software that can go and read all of the data that's on the chip or on the platters. We can shuck a drive. That is literally, if you want to switch my camera so that folks can see, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But oftentimes you'll see these books, this is my book. Inside of this is just a hard drive. Oftentimes you can take these drives out of these enclosures because it's the enclosure that's gone bad. And so you can read the data directly off the drive there. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. And then we might have professional services where we actually have to send the drive out to a professional to actually have them manage the drive in a clean room, disassemble it, run very specialized software on it. So we also have to think about and manage for our expectations for success. Oftentimes when we're doing restoring, backups usually are better, and restoring from a backup are better success rates. But even then we can run into problems. So it depends on what kind of backup was running and what kind of data was there. Software recovery, we can have really great success if the drive isn't physically damaged. a lot of times 60 to 95%, especially for logical issues. And the more physically damaged, the more lower probability that we're going to be able to recover data. And then with professional services, it can swing wildly because it depends on what happened to the drive. But then getting the drive into a clean room where trained technicians with specialized tools, sometimes can take them apart. We can have greater success, but then other times if the damage is too great, there's just not a lot that we can do. So now that we've talked about restoration and recovery, we're going to talk about, now that we've talked about the types of drives and the types of damage that can occur, we can look more closely at recovery, and then we'll start looking a little bit more closely at restoration. So with recovery, there's no single answer for how to do backup recoveries because it depends on what software you've been using, what platform. Is it a cloud-based thing? Is it a Windows thing? Is it a Mac thing? So I can't give like really simple, straightforward answers, do this and then do that. So what instead we're going to do is we're going to talk about principles and how to be systematic in your approach to doing a backup recovery. All right, let's go to my next slide here. Right, and I got to change my notes document. So, principles for backup. I like to keep this quote in mind, and this is just a thought to keep when it comes to thinking about your backups. A backup is a plan that you haven't tested. It's a hope, right? Backup you haven't tested is just a hope, not a plan. So one of the things that we talk about it's a very important part of anybody's backup system is testing before you need it. We have a lot of backup systems that are set it and forget it. I recommend and use Backblaze. That's a set it and forget it system. A lot of folks use Windows backup or Time Machine, which is on the Mac side. I literally had clients one time, we had to go back up a file and we went onto their cloud backup system. And it turns out that their system had not been backing up. Nobody had checked it in like a year or two and something had gone wrong and it didn't warn us. And wow, fortunately it wasn't anything major, but we want to make sure periodically that our backup is actually working. And so you want to go on to your backup system, whatever it is, whether it's local or whether it's cloud, and test to make sure that it's actually doing what it is you're doing. Try to restore a file or two, log on to that system and see if you can download a folder of things that maybe is from a long time ago or something very recently to make sure that the systems are working and that the data is complete. The next thing you want to think about as an important principle of doing data restoration backup recovery, is your time windows. Different types of backups can have different speeds in restoring that data. Cloud data can take days sometimes to download. Some systems, some platforms will even just send you a hard drive with that data because otherwise it would just take a week to download. I tried to do that once with a client. They had a ton of data. We're trying to restore a bunch of systems. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just use, I had a duct tape and baling wired system to tie into the back of the cloud system and download the data. And after about 3 or 4 days, it would just consistently would fail. And I was just like, so we just ended up ordering the hard drive from the system. So then we could go. But then even then, it took me multiple hours to get that backup data from the drive that they sent me onto the new drive to the person to send it off. So understand that recovery sometimes can take a long time. You also want to know that what kind of backup are you running? If you're on a Mac and you're using Time Machine and you have an external hard drive that has photos on it, that Time Machine is probably not backing up the photos on that external drive unless you were explicit about that. If you have a cloud system, maybe that cloud system isn't backing up your operating system files. So maybe your emails and your contacts and application settings, that stuff isn't necessarily getting backed up on the cloud. So understand what system you've got and what is being backed up and what's not being backed up. And understand, is it incremental changes that are being backed up, or is the system being snapshot, is there snapshots of the whole system, which could be a lot of data. So understand a little bit about your backup system. When you're pulling data from a backup system, this should be a little bit obvious, but you want to be really careful. Never restore directly back over your existing data until you're certain that you're ready to swap out the corrupted or missing data with the new data. You definitely don't want to restore from a backup onto an external hard drive if it's the external hard drive that's gone bad. Okay. Because you want to make sure, if you have to do a recovery, because sometimes we do recovery and restoration as part of a thing. We use both methods. So you also want to test that things are working. So it's like, oh, I got to back up, these dozen files, or I want to pull a dozen files off my backup, and it's a lot of data, a couple of terabytes, let's say. Test it incrementally. Oh, okay. Can I get this? Is it working? Okay, great. Is it taking? How long is it taking? And make sure that you understand the tool that you're working with and how that recovery is taking place. And then sort of build out from there, sort of build from your experience. And then lastly, just expect that 100% restoration is rare. Plan for gaps and sort of prioritize accordingly. Sometimes in backup systems, especially if you're working across system, maybe it's not your computer you're working on. Maybe somebody's given you some data, or you've grabbed a hard drive from somebody and you're trying to help them out. And maybe you're on different systems. Maybe the metadata gets lost. Maybe some of the keywords don't make it across in the migration. Maybe version conflicts exist, right? Like this version or that version. And you might end up with time gaps. So just recognize that even though you have a really good backup system, you still may not get a perfect 100% restoration. And that's the thing about backup, is that it's an emergency kind of situation. It is not the ideal state. So we could do as much as we can to prepare, but it's not often that we get a perfect one-for-one restoration of the data. Maybe it's just a little password missing. Maybe a star or a flag is missing. So just sort of be prepared for that. So let's think about, in the industry, there's the 4 R's of backup recovery. Ready. Test your backups before disaster strikes. 2 are realistic. Expect partial success, not perfection. So just like I was talking about, sometimes data just gets lost as it's moving around. Be resourceful. Sometimes you might need to use multiple restoration methods. Maybe it's a couple of different pieces of software. Maybe it's pulling the drive out of the enclosure. Maybe it's extracting as much as you can before sending it to a professional. And then be responsive. Know when to seek professional help. Know when to stop. Things seem to be getting worse, or I'm certainly not making any forward progress. Maybe that's the time to stop and then reach out to a professional to see what they might have to say. There's a lot of failures in backup restoration. Sometimes backup systems themselves are corrupted. Maybe there's an encryption problem, or even the backup system is failing. My wife's Time Machine drive, she had a little portable hard drive that's been running for a couple of years, just stopped working the other week. Fortunately, we haven't needed to it. We got a new one and we got in, but even backup systems can fail. So a question comes up is, at what point do you pursue further action? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but you want to keep that in your mind. And you want to think about, what are the triggers for you to think about getting professional help? Is there a deadline or some other time pressure? Or how critical are these photos? How technically complex does this seem to be? So when backups fail, that's when we turn to recovery. So when we can't do backup and we have to go to recovery, what are some of the things that we need to think about? And this is where I've put together a couple of resources that should help us think through uh, uh, different approaches to what to do in a disaster. Now, here's the thing: if you're doing recovery, you're in a disaster situation. It may not be a fire or a flood; it could just be a bad hard drive, but you're in an abnormal situation. And so, having a couple of visual tools that I put together for us helps, because it can get it's very easy to get lost in the weeds of what do I do, what actions, and I'm taking actions quickly because I'm in a hurry. Maybe there's a deadline. So understanding what to do under what circumstances is really important. We want to match your action to, we want to match your situation to the right action levels. So take a systematic approach to recovery, and let's take a look at these tools that I put together. The first one is this matrix, and we'll have this available. I need to send a fresh PDF of this to Rebecca, who's going to be able to make this available. But you can see here we have category storage versus category loss type. So internal SSDs, external hard drives, and then flash drives. And then we have the logical loss, the electronic loss, physical damage, and then progressive damage. And when you see one of the green cubes here, that means that generally speaking, you could pursue a DIY attempt at recovering your data. On the yellow grids, that's where you're going to want to consider and think about the value and the complexity and the time that's involved, and the type of damage, and in what cases. And the next flow chart is going to give you some more guidance on that. You can see there for category C, especially with internal SSDs and external hard drives, if there's been fire, water, or high impact damage, do not attempt a DIY recovery. That's really when you're going to want to reach out to a professional right away. Plugging in a drive that's been damaged by fire, where the platters have been warped, or a hard drive that's been submerged, whether it's an SSD or an HDD, can actually make the situation worse and can actually cause to more data loss. And then lastly, on the progressive wear type, where things are working, but it's starting to fail, that's where you want to also be careful. You can start a DIY recovery, but then understand that if things get worse, then maybe you should call it quits there. So hopefully that's a pretty straightforward grid that gives you some next steps for what kinds of action to take. Now, for these yellow grids, let's look at a little bit more specific circumstances. So say you've got a yellow result from the matrix, and you want to start to test to see if your DIY solution will work. First thing you're going to do, is it safe to test it? Is there any visible damage? Or if you shake it, do you hear some, parts and pieces rattling around? It's not safe to test. Do not plug it in. Assess the value. How important is this data? And then contact a professional. If this is the third drive, the second drive of a backup system, and hey, I'm pretty sure I've got all my data over here, it's fine. I'll just set that aside, check out my other backup. All my data is there. Good. Whew, I can move on. But hey, this is the most precious drive. It has all my family legacy photos on it. This is the only one. There's no cloud backup, nothing. This is really important. Okay, now I'm going to go seek professional help and figure out what's going to cost to get this taken care of. On the other side, is it safe? There doesn't seem to be any problems. You plug it in and the computer recognizes it, and you still know that there's a problem with the drive. Go ahead, start a DIY backup. Or if you've engaged a professional like one of the photo managers or something like that, start the data backup and then get that data backed up onto a safe spot as soon as possible. if you're in your assessment and you're thinking, okay, this is this electronic or progressive data. I know it's been failing. I know it's been having some troubles. Let me do a recognition test. Let me plug it in. And when I plug it in, do I hear clicking or grinding sounds? Do I smell something burning or, some other, problem, some strange odor? Unplug it right there and then go back. That's not safe. And then assess value and then check in with a professional. If you do plug it in and it does work and you're able to get data on it, great. Read the data on it, great. Run your recovery and move to the next step. If you plug it in and it doesn't respond at all, it's just dead, no sounds, no smells, no vibrations, nothing. It's just not recovering. It's not booting up. Then you have two options. If it's dead, then you got to think about value. And that is if it's not a drive that you can shuck. So like I said before, your other option is to take it out of its plastic enclosure. And this really only works on these spinning hard drives. SSDs, you can't really do this with. You can take it out of its enclosure and then you can get a USB cable that plugs into the back here. Or you can plug it into something we call a toaster, where you can plug it in and it's like a drive dock. And then the computer can power up the drive and read the data off of this. And then if the drive is recognized, and I've done that a lot actually, because the circuitry goes bad. In some cases it doesn't. And then that's where we have to seek professional help. So say that you are running a DIY software at home, you're running some software recovery. What happens? You get a result, you get that data. You have basically three outcomes. Full success, you get all your data back. Everything's great. Good. Get that data onto a new drive, make sure that it's backed up, make sure that the data is secure, and then you're done. You're lucky. You're one of the one of the luckies. You can have failure. You can get no data off of it, even though it might be spinning up and responding. There again, you're going to assess value and then potentially contact a professional. Oftentimes, we have a partial success. This is very common, and this is what I was talking about before. Sometimes recovery and restoration are two are the same. Like we are able to pull some data off of it, but we're not able to get more data off of it. You can either accept that partial recovery and go, okay, good enough. I'm going to secure that data. Or there's really some important stuff that's not coming up. I'm going to need to talk to a professional, find out the cost, and then contact a professional to see if they can recover more of the data. All right. So now that we've talked about that matrix and that flow chart for the action, let's talk a little bit about software and professional services. So actually implementing some of these things. Oops, sorry. Where's my next slide? So let's talk about software first before we talk about professionals. I'm going to list some softwares. I'm going to list some categories. First off, these are not recommendations. I am not specifically recommending any particular software that I'm listing. These are just popular titles that if you did a search for, you would come up, or I've heard people, or in some cases, I've used them myself. The marketplace for recovery software is aggressive, to say the least. If you go on and you say lost files or recovery software, any of those kinds of keywords, you're going to get tons and tons of ads, and you're going to get lots of deals and sales and try this one and try that one. It's an aggressive marketplace. So check with a trusted source. Do you have a friend who's tech savvy? Do you have a local computer shop? Do you have a photo manager in your life that you're working with? Do you have the number for a professional recovery service, even just to ask their advice? Check in with other people and ask some questions before you try software. And if they have it, do a try and buy. You get a 7-day or 14-day download before you have to buy, or you can scan the software, it just won't let you recover it And then if you want to recover, then you can pay the purchase price. That's fine. Just don't go throwing a lot of money at a lot of different software solutions, because there's a lot of them out there and there are less than reputable companies out there. Shock and surprise. And then remember that your situation is kind of unique to you. What computer do you have? What kind of backup system is it running? What kind of hard drive is it? What type of connection is it? How old is the drive? There's a lot of variables in the overall situation for your circumstance. So it's not always a cookie cutter thing. So just be aware and be resilient. Part of that 4 R's that we were talking about before. All right, this is a big, ugly slide. I didn't know how else to do it. I could have made it multiple slides, but I didn't want to. The point wasn't to say to you, this is the software that you should use. This is more that there are tiers of software out there. There is a big strata of different types of tools. There's free software that has basic functionality with limited support. Sometimes it's a good starting point. If you're just trying to get a memory card from a camera or a thumb drive to recover some, music or photos, maybe that works. Then the next level up is the paid consumer tier. And that's where most of us who are photo professionals, we've probably interacted with one or two of these before. Usually reputable, oftentimes have a long time in the marketplace and have good reputations. They're not free, but they're not overly expensive either. You probably pick something up between $50 and $150, depending. There's a big range of things. They all kind of do the same stuff. And so it's bells and whistles at one level. So, but there are a lot of players in this market space. And then lastly, there's the professional tier. These are the highly specialized tool that take, weeks of training to understand how to use them. It's usually encapsulated around more training because you're working in a clean room. You have to things, emulators and all kinds of crazy stuff. And this is for like forensic recovery. This is like, these are the big tools. So again, not wanting to recommend a specific software, just know that there's a lot of tools out there and to be cautious in your approach to if you do want to download something. So say you do start downloading something, there are basically 3 phases of a recovery process. There's the scanning phase, the preview phase, and then the recovery phase. The scanning phase can take hours. It can take a long time for software to read the data on a drive, especially if the drive is struggling or having troubles. If you can, let it run the course, because interruptions can cause you more problems down the road. Once the software has been able to find the files and the data that's out there and kind of put things back together, oftentimes there's an integrity check or some way to validate that this is working, and then this data can get reconstructed. Oftentimes you have a choice. Oh, it found PDFs and Word documents and photographs and music files. Prioritize what it is that you're trying to get. I just need the Word files. I just need the photographs, right? So prioritize and then just try to extract those first before doing anything else. And then lastly, there's the recovery phase, which can also take a long time. Monitor that for progress, watch for error messages, make sure you're putting them in a safe location in a new, on a new drive, or maybe even on a different computer. If you're able to move the data on, from another hard drive. And you might want to think about too, what kind of, if you're using an external hard drive to recover to, what is that drive? Because if it's a slower drive on a slower USB connection, that can slow down the process. So think about your recovery phase, and that's really good where you can, if the drive is holding up well, you can do little tests along the way and go, okay, great. Let me test this, see how it's working. Does it seem to be moving quickly? Great. Remember, never recover to the same drive, and stop immediately if problems worsen. If you get if the number of errors is increasing, if you're getting weird sounds or smells from the drive, just stop it right there and move on. So when we're in recovery, we want to think about our expectations versus reality. And we've talked about this a little bit before. Oftentimes, you don't get all the data back. And that's the way it goes. I see that we're running on time, so I want to make sure I'm going to speed through the next couple of slides because I want to make sure that we have time for questions and answers. Again, if things get worse, if things get complex, if it gets harder and harder, just stop, call a professional. Lastly, when you do call a professional, look at that organization. Do they have an established track record? How old are they? How long have they been in business? How many recommendations are they flashing on their webpage saying that we've been endorsed by these people and gotten an award from that people? Do hard drive manufacturers recognize them? Yeah, SanDisk says this is a good company. Seagate says this is a good company, right? See if they have relationships with the manufacturer of drives. That's very actually important because that means that the manufacturer and that organization have an understanding and the professionals have the inside knowledge that they need. Does the company, if you're dealing with photographs, does the company have specialized photo expertise? Yeah, photos are kind of simple in some ways compared to other documents, but they come with their own challenges because of the volume and the size of data. Raw formats are very widely from camera to camera. So do they have specialized photo experience? And do they have transparent pricing? You don't want to send in a drive. A lot of times, good reputable companies will give you an assessment for free. They'll tell you a cost, and that's the cost no matter what they end up having to do on the back end. So make sure that you understand that there's no hidden fees, because the last thing you want to hear is, hey, we got all your data, but it's going to cost 5 times as much as that we originally quoted you. That's very uncool. So, keep that in mind. All right, so let's wrap it up and talk about a couple of key takeaways. Stop, don't make it worse. Pretty obvious. Restore and or recover. Sometimes restoration and recovery cross. Sometimes we use both in a single incident where we're able to get some data, or we pull some data from a backup and we're able to pull some data from the damaged drive. If you're doing a DIY recovery, have a plan. Use the guides. If you don't have my guides, then make a plan yourself. Talk to a friend who's a little tech savvy and understand the steps that you're going to take, and then know when you're going to stop if things get worse. And then lastly, other workshops are talking about this, so I'm not going to go into it, but prevention really is the best option here. You do not want to be in a backup recovery or restoration solution or situation. So back up your data and have good, reliable backups that you're testing on a regular basis. The gold standard in the industry is 3-2-1. You want 3 copies of your data. You want them in 2 locations. The one that you're working on, and then your 2 backups you want in 2 different locations, and preferably on 2 different media. So you could have the backup that's on your computer. You could have the backup drive. Say, I'm just using Mac as an example here. You have your laptop, you have a Time Machine drive, and then you have a cloud backup, right? So then you have your data in 3 places, 2 local, 1 offsite. Sorry, that I got the 3-2-1 mixed up. So it's 3 copies, 2 of them locally, and 1 of them somewhere else. Not everyone can do 3-2-1 all the time. Cost considerations being what they are, technology understandings. You can do 2-1-1. That is 2 copies, 1 local, 1 offsite. So you could have just your 1 backup, and then you could have your cloud backup or something like that. Something is better than nothing, right? Have something at least, right? Have a parachute and have a backup parachute, even if you can't do the full 3-2-1. And then do regular testing. Really investing in your backup system is preventing it's going to pay dividends in your peace of mind. It's really going to let you feel calm, especially in the face of disaster. So make sure that you have good backup systems in place. All right, that's the end of the show. Hopefully we've got a lot of good questions, and I know I was speeding along there pretty quick, but it was a lot of information, and hopefully we learned a little bit. Angie, what do we got?
Oh my goodness, that was so amazing. I'm going to give you just a second to take a breath, because I don't know how you got all that information. That was really amazing. While David takes a breath, we're going to give you a second to write any last questions in the chat for him to answer. I have a few myself, but I just want to talk really fast, quickly about something that's happening September 27th. It's a Saturday. It's called Memory Keepers Summit Live, or Memory Keepers Live Summit. And it's a virtual day of like really taking photos to the next level. So it's virtual. You get to stay in your house. We have experts coming in to talk about preparedness, photo organizing, recovery. There's opportunities that you'll be able to meet other people and lots of different resources. And then 10% of all the proceeds go to help the Weather Resilience Fund, which is so important. So please, if this is interesting, we have this pinned to our YouTube page here. So check it out and reserve your spot. It will be a great thing. So we are going to go to questions now. Are you ready, David? Okay.
Maybe it would help if I turn my mic back on.
All right.
I feel winded.
What is the very first step we should take if we suddenly realize we've lost photos? And what's the biggest mistake to avoid in that moment?
Well, it goes back to that matrix that I had earlier. Is what type of drive are you talking about, and what happened to the lost photo? So is it a loss? Is it a photo that was deleted on your computer's internal hard drive? First question is, did you empty the trash already? If you did, you're probably going to lose that data because modern SSDs erase that data almost immediately. Is it an external hard drive, whether a regular spinning, HDD or an SSD? Likelihood, and you just deleted it and you emptied the trash, likely the data is there. So you're going to be able to run some DIY software and probably get that data back, or at least most of it. So if you have a damaged drive, it gets into a level where you really, unless you know what you're doing, you want to talk to a professional. The thing you don't want to do on an internal drive is empty the trash. If you accidentally deleted something, make sure that you have your trash set to either never auto delete or maybe set it for 30 days or something like that. If it's something that is like a physical damage, something physically happened to the drive, that's where you want to stop and not make it worse by maybe plugging it in or shaking it really hard, to see like, maybe I can just shake it back in this way. Don't make it worse if you see visible damage to the hard drive itself.
All right. And I think your flowcharts were so helpful for that. So thank you for those.
And we're going to make those available. I don't know. I didn't get the PDFs delivered in time, but I'm sure, I don't know if we can post them on the YouTube or contact us and I can definitely send them to you.
I think if everybody clicks back a little bit later, they'll be available.
Okay, great. Yeah.
All right. Next question. Where do I check on my Time Machine external hard drive to make sure it's backing up my iPhotos?
That's a really good question and very important. So the thing that I would do is go into the Time Machine control in the system settings in the Time Machine. You can go there and you can see when the last backup occurred. You can check that it's there. When you are also from the menu, you can enter Time Machine. I haven't done it in a minute, so I'm trying to recall from my own mind. You can go to the pull down menu and you can enter Time Machine, and you can see. So what you do is you open up your pictures folder where your iPhone catalog is. And then go up to your pull down menu where your Time Machine should be up in the little menu bar and choose Enter Time Machine. And with that first Finder window open right there, it'll take you right into the Time Machine for that location. And then on the left hand or on the right hand side, it'll show going back in time all of the backups that it's made. And you can run your mouse up and down that, and you can see the dates and the times. And you can click on one of those times and it will, you sort of fly through time and you get to that location, and then you can say, okay, take this and restore it. And you can pull it out from that time, and then Time Machine will pull it out. But the most important thing is check the system settings, and it'll give you a little there's a little log there. It says, oh, the last backup was this or that. And then the other thing is to go into enter Time Machine, and then go back and look through to see that they're there. There are some third-party applications out there that do check Time Machines that can query to see what you've got going on. But that's a little bit more technical. It's not rocket science, but it's a step further. So
right. And I loved your advice to check it before so that you know how it works. So
exactly.
Great advice there. Oh, this is a really important one. Is Time Machine a backup or a sync to iPhotos?
Well, now we're getting into the weirdness that is the Apple ecosystem. Time Machine is not syncing iPhoto photos. Time Machine is making a snapshot, an incremental, and it's marking the incremental changes from the last time that it ran a backup. So the very first time you run Time Machine, it takes a picture of the whole drive, and it has all the data. And in a very special way, it crunches it down. It does a bunch of weird compression stuff to it and makes it so that it can fit. And then what it does is when it's running its backup cycle, it checks all the systems in the whole drive. Anything changed? What changed? Okay, the user added 50 more images. Then it's just the 50 images that get added to that existing backup. So it's only recording the changes between that initial snapshot. So it's not syncing the photos, whereas say Dropbox is sync, Google Drive is sync. The sync settings can be turned on. And even Apple Photo, when you're syncing to the cloud. So sync is, there's a file here, and there are 2 other systems or 3 other systems that are connected. So they all should have the same file, and they should all be exactly the same at all times. So when a change is made to one, it changes all of the others.
Right.
So it's incrementally keeping all of those connected. Whereas backup, it's stopping it's recording the change and then stopping it there. It's not trying to put it in other places. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes,
okay.
It does.
Right.
So I think that's why it's so important to understand that, because sometimes it gets a little confusing.
Which goes back to what I was saying before about understanding what backup does and what it is, and what is being backed up and what is not being backed up. And you end up getting a little technical in that world, but with ChatGPT or Claude or all these great tools that are out there, you can do natural language searching and say, what is backup, or what is Time Machine backing up, or how do I, you could talk to me or you could talk to another photo manager. We could probably help you.
Right.
And there's a lot of online resources, be they LLMs or just regular internet searches, that you can learn some of those basics of what is actually covered. What is my umbrella? You get an umbrella that's really big, those golf umbrellas that are like massive. You can put 5 people underneath them, or you have the little travel one that's just tiny, that just covers your head. Understanding that difference will make a difference when you go to rely on that backup.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And this video will be available, so you can come back and watch it again if you have other questions. I think this might be our last question.
Okay, great.
I found some really old backup CDs, but some won't read anymore. Is there any tool or service that can recover the images?
Yes, photo managers can do that. I just did that for somebody. I had 80 CDs, and about 10 or 15% of them I couldn't read. I had to use my old iMac back here that you saw back here, which is like running really, really old operating system. I had another one that was running, I had to use 2 different computers. I had a couple of CD-ROM drives that I had to get. I had to use a piece of software called CD Roller, but that's only a PC thing, so that's a whole thing. So the CD-ROMs, it's a really important topic. A lot of us have a lot of CDs in our closets. 2 things are happening. One, they're degrading over time, and the data is going to get harder and harder to read off of them. And 2, if they've been scratched or damaged in some ways, that can make pulling the data off of there harder. And number 3, our current systems can't read the old formatting of the old CD-ROMs. I have their latest and greatest operating system, and I had got my client's CDs and I started feeding them and it wasn't reading. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like really serious. So fortunately, I have the tools and the knowledge, but I had to roll back and go to older systems to be able to pull that data off. So if you have CD-ROMs, I know this is a photo manager sponsored thing, but many of us photo managers know how to handle that, and we have the extra hardware and the older systems that can help you pull that data off. But get them, whatever you do, or maybe it's the shop down the street, maybe it's your local repair shop, whatever, get the data off the CD-ROMs. That's actually kind of an important point. I haven't even thought about that in a little while. That's a really important point.
I know people used to think that those were the best storage, and they're just, it's not good. Get them taken care of.
Exactly.
All right. Well, David, we want to thank you. We want to thank you so much for today. It was really great. Oof. And just a reminder, act quickly, because sometimes you don't have very much time. So if you have a situation, act straight away, and please follow David's advice and figure out how to do it before the situation comes. So thank you again, David, for sharing your strategies and the flow charts. And just a reminder to like our meeting today and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of good information for you, and register for Memory Keepers Live that's coming up. And we're so grateful that you were here with us today. We have another Save Your Photos coming up on Tuesday, September 23rd, and we're going to be learning from one of my all-time favorite people, Jill Yesko-Diana, and she is amazing. She's going to give us some strategies to deal with the emotional load that comes with dealing with clutter. And I don't know if anybody's ever felt that, but I have. And
for sure,
Jill is fantastic at talking about it. So make sure you tune in for that, and make sure you subscribe, because then you'll get a notification. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks, everyone. Again, David.
Thank you, Angie. Thanks, everyone.